Eleanor Grayson sat at the polished mahogany table in her dining room. The same table where laughter once echoed, where birthday cakes were sliced, and where her 3 children, Margaret, Thomas, and Clara, had once scribbled their names into the wood with crayons. The table was empty now, save for a single plate, a glass of water, and a small vanilla cupcake with a lone candle. The flame flickered, casting shadows on the walls of her quiet home in upstate New York. It was her 75th birthday, and for the 3rd year in a row. No one had called. No cards arrived in the mail. No footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway. She stared at the cupcake, its frosting melting under the candle's heat. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Eleanor's hands, wrinkled but steady, rested on the table. She wore her favorite lavender cardigan, the one she'd knitted herself decades ago when her children were still small enough to curl up in her lap. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, and her eyes, though tired, held a spark of defiance. She wasn't waiting for them anymore. 3 years. 3 birthdays forgotten. It wasn't just the absence of celebration that stung. It was the absence of acknowledgement. Margaret, her eldest, lived 2 hours away in Manhattan, buried in her corporate career. Thomas, the middle child, was in Chicago, chasing his dreams of being a musician while juggling odd jobs. Clara, the youngest, had moved to California, swept up in the tech world's glitter. They were busy, Eleanor told herself in the beginning. Life gets in the way. But 3 years of silence had eroded her excuses, leaving only a raw, aching truth: her children had forgotten her. She blew out the candle, the wisp of smoke curling upward like a question mark. The cupcake remained untouched. Eleanor stood, her movements slow but deliberate, and walked to her study. The room was her sanctuary, lined with bookshelves filled with classics and journals she'd kept since her 20s. On the desk sat a leather-bound folder, its edges worn from years of handling. Inside was her estate plan, meticulously drafted with her lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, over a decade ago. Back then, it had been simple. Her modest fortune, built from years of teaching literature and careful investments, would be divided equally among her 3 children. They were her legacy, after all. But tonight, something shifted. Eleanor opened the folder and stared at the document. Her heart pounded, not with anger, but with a quiet resolve. She picked up a pen, her hand trembling slightly, and began to write a letter, not to her children, but to Mr. Hargrove. It was time to make a change. The next morning, Eleanor drove to town, the autumn leaves swirling around her old station wagon. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine filled her lungs as she stepped into Hargrove's office. He was a kind man, nearing retirement himself, with a face that seemed permanently etched with concern. "Eleanor, it's good to see you," he said, adjusting his glasses. "What brings you here?" She placed the folder on his desk. "I want to revise my will." Hargrove's eyebrows rose, but he nodded, opening the folder. "All right. What changes are you considering?" Eleanor took a deep breath, her voice steady. "I'm removing Margaret, Thomas, and Clara from my estate." The room fell silent. Hargrove leaned back, his expression a mix of surprise and caution. "Eleanor, that's a significant decision. May I ask why?" She looked out the window, where the town square bustled with people she'd known for decades. "They've forgotten me," she said simply. 3 years. No calls. No visits. Not even a card for my birthday. I raised them, loved them, sacrificed for them. But I won't beg for their attention. If I'm not part of their lives now, they don't get to be part of my legacy. Hargrove hesitated, then nodded. I understand. But let's take this step by step. Have you considered reaching out to them first? Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. I've waited long enough. They know where I am. They know my number. This isn't about revenge, William. It's about respect for myself. He sighed, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper. All right. Who would you like to name as beneficiaries instead? Eleanor had thought about this all night. The community center, she said. The library, the youth scholarship fund, and the animal shelter. They've done more for me in these past few years than my own children. They deserve it. Hargrove scribbled notes, his pen scratching against the paper. I'll draft the new documents. But I'd suggest giving it a week to think it over. This is permanent. Eleanor. She nodded, though her mind was made up. As she left the office, a weight lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in years, she felt like she was choosing herself. Back at home, Eleanor began sorting through old photographs. Each one was a memory: Margaret's first piano recital, Thomas's high school graduation, Clara's gap-toothed smile on her 7th birthday. Her heart ached, but she didn't cry. She placed the photos in a box, not to throw them away, but to tuck them out of sight. They were part of her past, but they no longer defined her future. She spent the afternoon at the community center, where she volunteered twice a week. The kids there called her Miss Ellie, their faces lighting up when she read them stories or helped with their homework. They didn't know about her wealth or her loneliness. They just knew she was kind. That was enough. As the sun set, Eleanor sat on her porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming her hands. The stars were beginning to emerge, and she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was what her life was meant to be now, not waiting for her children to remember her, but building something new, something meaningful. She wasn't erasing her love for them. She was redefining her legacy. The week after her meeting with Hargrove passed in a blur of routine. Eleanor woke early each morning, tending to her garden where roses and lavender bloomed despite the autumn chill. She taught a literature class at the community center, her voice steady as she guided teenagers through Pride and Prejudice. Their earnest discussions about love and duty stirred something in her, a reminder that connection could be found beyond family ties. Yet, each night, as she sat alone in her quiet house, the absence of her children gnawed at her. She hadn't told anyone about her decision to change her will, not even her closest friend, Lila, who ran the library. Lila had a way of seeing through Eleanor's calm exterior, and Eleanor wasn't ready to explain herself. Not yet. Instead, she poured her energy into the community, attending town meetings, helping organize the annual Harvest Festival, and knitting scarves for the shelter's winter drive. These acts filled the void, or at least kept it at bay. One afternoon, as Eleanor sorted books in the library's donation pile, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped at a rare occurrence, as her phone seldom rang these days. She pulled it out, expecting a reminder from the community center. Instead, Clara's name flashed on the screen. Eleanor froze, her thumb hovering over the answer button. 3 years of silence. And now Clara was calling. Part of her wanted to pick up, to hear her youngest daughter's voice, to believe it was an apology or a step toward reconciliation. But another part, the part that had sat alone with a cupcake for 3 birthdays, held firm. She let the call go to voicemail. The message was brief. Clara's voice bright but rushed. Hey, Mom. It's me. Just checking in. Been super busy with work, but I was thinking about you. Call me back when you get a chance. Okay. Love you. Eleanor replayed the message twice, searching for sincerity. It sounded genuine, but it also sounded convenient, like an afterthought squeezed between meetings. She didn't call back. Instead, she tucked the phone away and returned to the books, her hands trembling slightly as she stacked them. That evening, she visited Hargrove again. The new will was ready, a crisp document that redirected her estate to the community center, library, scholarship fund, and animal shelter. Eleanor read it carefully, her eyes lingering on the clause that explicitly excluded her children. It felt final, like closing a book she'd never reopen. She signed the papers, her signature steady, and handed them back to Hargrove. "You're sure about this?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing. "I am," Eleanor said. "It's not about punishment. It's about living my life on my terms." Hargrove nodded, sealing the documents in an envelope. "I'll file these tomorrow. If you change your mind, you know where to find me." She thanked him and left, the weight of her decision settling into her bones. It wasn't anger that drove her, but a quiet insistence on self-respect. She had given her children everything: love, time, opportunities, and they had chosen distance. Now, she was choosing herself. The following weekend, Eleanor attended the Harvest Festival. The town square was alive with music, laughter, and the scent of apple cider. Children darted between booths, their faces painted with pumpkins and ghosts. Eleanor manned the library's book sale table, chatting with neighbors and recommending novels. For the first time in years, she felt truly present, unburdened by the hope of a phone call that never came. As she handed a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird to a teenage girl, her eyes caught a familiar figure across the square. Margaret. Her eldest daughter stood near the cider stand, her tailored coat and sleek ponytail out of place among the flannel and denim of the townsfolk. Eleanor's breath caught, but she didn't wave or call out. She watched as Margaret scanned the crowd, her expression unreadable. Margaret hadn't called or visited in years, yet here she was, unannounced. Eleanor's first instinct was to approach her, to ask why she'd come after all this time. But she stayed rooted behind the table, her hands gripping the book she held. Margaret's eyes passed over her without recognition, and then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Eleanor's chest tightened, but she forced a smile as the teenage girl thanked her for the book. She wouldn't let Margaret's presence unravel her. Not today. Not ever again. That night, Eleanor sat in her study, the new will locked in her safe. She opened a journal and began to write, not about her children, but about the festival of children's laughter, the warmth of the community, the life she was building. Her pen moved quickly, the words flowing like a river breaking free. She wasn't erasing her past. She was writing a new chapter. The weeks following the festival were a delicate balance of routine and reflection. Eleanor threw herself into her volunteer work, teaching, gardening, and knitting with a fervor that surprised even her. The community center became her second home, where she found purpose in the small victories, helping a shy student find their voice, or seeing a child's eyes light up during story time. Yet, Margaret's brief appearance lingered like a ghost, stirring questions Eleanor wasn't ready to answer. Had Margaret come to see her? Or was it coincidence? A fleeting visit to the town for some other reason? Eleanor didn't know, and she didn't reach out to find out. The silence between them was a wall she'd built brick by brick, and she wasn't ready to tear it down. One chilly November morning, as Eleanor pruned her roses, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Thomas. Her heart thudded, but she let the call go to voicemail, just as she had with Clara. His message was longer, his voice rough with fatigue. "Mom, it's Tom. I know it's been a while. Things have been crazy here: gigs, bills, You know how it is. I was thinking maybe I could come by for Thanksgiving. Call me back. All right. I miss you. Eleanor stood in her garden, the pruning shears heavy in her hand. Thanksgiving. The word conjured memories of crowded tables, her children's laughter, and the chaos of cooking together. But those memories were old, faded like the photographs in her box. She didn't call back. Instead, she returned to her roses, clipping away dead blooms with precision. That afternoon, she drove to the animal shelter, where she'd begun spending more time. The shelter was a noisy, joyful place, filled with wagging tails and hopeful eyes. Eleanor had always loved animals, but her children's allergies had kept pets out of their home when they were young. Now, she found solace in walking the dogs, brushing the cats, and helping match them with families. One dog, a scruffy terrier named Max, had taken a particular liking to her, following her everywhere with unwavering loyalty. As she tossed a ball for Max in the shelter's yard, the director, Sarah, approached. "You're a natural, Eleanor," she said, smiling. "Ever think about adopting one of these guys?" Eleanor laughed, a rare sound these days. "Oh, I don't know. My house is quiet enough as it is." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Quiet's overrated. Max would keep you company." Eleanor looked at Max, who dropped the ball at her feet and wagged his tail. For a moment, she imagined him curled up on her couch, his warmth against her side. The thought was tempting, but she shook her head. Maybe someday. That evening, she sat at her dining table, not with a cupcake, but with a bowl of soup and a book. The grandfather clock ticked on, and the house felt less empty than it had in years. She was learning to fill it herself with purpose, with community, with small acts of kindness. Her children's absence still hurt, but it was a dull ache now, not a sharp stab. The next day, Eleanor received a letter from Hargrove confirming the filing of her new will. She read it carefully, then tucked it away in her safe. The decision felt right, but it also felt heavy. She wasn't cutting her children out of her heart, just her estate. Her love for them was a constant, but it no longer defined her choices. As Thanksgiving approached, Eleanor made plans to volunteer at the community center's holiday dinner. She didn't expect her children to show up, and she didn't want to spend the day waiting. Instead, she focused on the people who were there, the families who relied on the center, the volunteers who became her extended family, the kids who called her Miss Ellie. This was her life now, and she was determined to live it fully. Thanksgiving arrived with a dusting of snow, blanketing the town in a quiet beauty. Eleanor spent the morning at the community center, stirring pots of mashed potatoes and setting tables with mismatched plates. The room buzzed with volunteers, their chatter mingling with the clatter of dishes. For the first time in years, Eleanor didn't dread the holiday. She wasn't alone, not really. As she served slices of turkey to a line of grateful families, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen's heat. These people, strangers and friends alike, filled the space her children had left empty. She laughed with Lila over a spilled tray of rolls, helped a young boy cut his food, and listened to an elderly man share stories of his youth. This was family, she realized, not bound by blood, but by shared moments. After the dinner, Eleanor stayed late to clean up, her hands pruning in soapy water as she washed dishes. The center was nearly empty when Sarah from the animal shelter approached, holding a leash with Max at the end. His tail wagged furiously, and Eleanor couldn't help but smile. "I brought someone to see you," Sarah said, her eyes twinkling. "I know you said maybe someday, but I thought today might be that day." Eleanor knelt, scratching Max behind the ears. His warmth pressed against her, and she felt a tug at her heart. "Your trouble," aren't you?" she murmured to the dog. Sarah laughed. "He's been waiting for you." "Eleanor." "What do you say?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Let's make it official." That night, Max curled up on her couch, his head resting on her lap as she read. The house felt alive again, filled with the soft sounds of his breathing and the occasional thump of his tail. For the first time in years, Eleanor didn't check her phone for messages. She didn't need to. The following week, a letter arrived from Margaret. It was handwritten, a rarity in the age of emails and texts. Eleanor's fingers traced the envelope, her daughter's neat script stirring a mix of emotions. She opened it, her eyes scanning the words. "Dear Mom, I saw you at the festival. I wanted to talk, but I didn't know how to start. I know I've been distant, and I'm sorry. Work has been overwhelming, but that's no excuse. Can we talk? I miss you. Love, Margaret." Eleanor set the letter down, her heart heavy. The apology was what she'd longed for, but it felt too late. She didn't doubt Margaret's sincerity, but sincerity couldn't erase 3 years of silence. She didn't respond, not out of anger, but because she wasn't sure what to say. The woman who had waited for her children was gone, replaced by someone who valued her own peace. She spent the day with Max, taking him for a walk through the snowy woods behind her house. His joy was infectious, chasing squirrels and rolling in the snow. Eleanor laughed, her breath visible in the cold air. She felt lighter, unburdened by the expectations she'd once carried. That evening, she visited the library, where Lila was hosting a book club. They discussed The Great Gatsby, and Eleanor found herself drawn to the theme of letting go of unattainable dreams. As she spoke, her voice steady and passionate, she realized she was letting go too not of her love for her children, but of the hope that they would fill the void in her life. When she returned home, she found another voicemail, this time from Clara. "Mom, I heard from Margaret you were at the festival. I'm sorry I haven't been better about staying in touch. Can I come visit soon? I want to make things right." Eleanor listened, then deleted the message. She wasn't ready to open that door. Not yet. She had her own life to live, her own legacy to build. Max nudged her hand, and she smiled, scratching his ears. "You're all the company I need right now," she said softly. Winter settled over the town, wrapping Eleanor's world in a quiet hush. Max became her constant companion, his playful energy filling the house with life. She taught him trick sit, stay, roll over, and found herself laughing more than she had in years. The community center remained her anchor, where she expanded her literature classes and started a writing workshop for teens. Her days were full, her heart less heavy. Yet, the letters and voicemails from her children continued. Thomas sent a postcard from Chicago, a brief note about a gig he'd played and a promise to visit soon. Clara emailed, her words careful but earnest, asking to meet over the holidays. Margaret called twice, leaving messages that grew more desperate. Eleanor read and listened to each one, but she didn't respond. It wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. One snowy afternoon, as Eleanor sorted donations at the shelter, Sarah pulled her aside. "You've been different lately," she said, her tone warm but curious. "Happier, but guarded. Everything okay?" Eleanor hesitated, then shared the truth about her children and the will. Sarah listened, her eyes widening but her expression non-judgmental. "That's a big step," she said finally. "But it sounds like you're doing it for you, not against them." "Exactly," Eleanor said, relieved someone understood. "I spent years waiting for them to remember me. I'm done waiting." Sarah nodded, handing her a bag of dog treats for Max. "You're building something beautiful here, Eleanor. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that." The words stayed with Eleanor as she drove home, Max snoozing in the back seat. She thought about her children. Their apologies. Their sudden interest. Were they genuine? Or had they somehow learned about the will? The thought nagged at her, but she pushed it aside. She didn't need to know their motives to know her own. That evening, she sat at her desk, writing in her journal. She described the shelter, the community center, the kids who looked up to her. She wrote about Max, about the way he greeted her each morning with unbridled joy. These were her legacy now, not the children who had forgotten her. As Christmas approached, Eleanor decorated her home not for her children, but for herself and Max. She strung lights around the porch, hung a wreath on the door, and placed a small tree in the living room. The house glowed with warmth, and she felt a sense of pride in the life she'd created. On Christmas Eve, she hosted a small gathering for the library volunteers. Lila brought her famous pecan pie, and the group laughed and swapped stories late into the night. Eleanor felt a pang when she thought of past Christmases with her children, but it was fleeting. She was surrounded by people who valued her, who showed up without being asked. As the guests left, Lila lingered, her eyes soft with concern. "You're okay, aren't you, Eleanor? Really okay?" Eleanor smiled, resting a hand on Max's head. "I am. For the first time in a long time. I really am." The new year brought a fresh layer of snow and a renewed sense of purpose. Eleanor's writing workshop at the community center grew, attracting more students who found solace in putting their thoughts on paper. She saw herself in them, the quiet ones who carried heavy stories, the bold ones who needed a nudge to focus. Teaching them became her way of giving back, of leaving a mark that mattered. Her children's attempts to reconnect continued. Margaret sent a long email, detailing her struggles with work-life balance and her regret for drifting away. Thomas called, his voice softer now, promising a visit in the spring. Clara sent a Packagia scarf she'd knitted, a clumsy echo of Eleanor's own craft. Each gesture tugged at Eleanor's heart, but she held firm. She didn't respond, not because she didn't care, but because she was no longer defined by their absence. One February morning, as Eleanor walked Max through the town park, she saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench. It was Margaret, her coat wrapped tightly against the cold, her face pale and anxious. Eleanor's steps slowed, but she didn't stop. Margaret stood, calling out, "Mom, please." Eleanor paused, Max tugging at his leash. She turned, meeting her daughter's eyes. "Margaret," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "I've been trying to reach you. I'm sorry, Mom. I know I messed up." Eleanor studied her daughter, the lines on her face, the exhaustion in her eyes. She wanted to believe her, but the hurt ran deep. 3 years. "Margaret," she said quietly. "Not a call. Not a card. I waited, but I'm done waiting." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I was selfish, caught up in my own life. But I want to fix this. Please, let me try." Eleanor felt a pang, but she shook her head. "I've built a life here, Margaret. One that doesn't revolve around waiting for you or your siblings. I wish you well, but I need to take care of myself now." She turned and walked away, Max trotting beside her. Margaret called after her, but Eleanor didn't look back. The encounter left her shaken, but it also strengthened her resolve. She wasn't closing the door on her children forever just on the pain of their neglect. That afternoon, She met with Hargrove to review her estate plan one last time. He confirmed everything was in order. The funds allocated to the community organizations she'd chosen. "You're doing a lot of good, Eleanor," he said. "The town will feel this for years." Eleanor nodded, a quiet pride swelling in her chest. "That's what I want. To leave something that matters." She spent the evening at the shelter, helping with a new litter of kittens. Max watched from the sidelines, his tail wagging as she cooed over the tiny creatures. The shelter staff teased her about becoming a cat lady, and she laughed, the sound echoing in the room. This was her place now, her purpose. Spring arrived, softening the town with blooming flowers and longer days. Eleanor's garden flourished, her roses a riot of color that drew compliments from neighbors. She spent her mornings tending to them. Max sprawled in the grass nearby. Her life had settled into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar, a balance of solitude and connection. Her children's attempts to reconnect slowed but didn't stop. Thomas sent a text, asking if he could visit in April. Clara emailed about a trip she was planning to New York, hinting at a stop in town. Margaret sent another letter, longer this time, filled with memories of their childhood and promises to do better. Eleanor read each one, her heart softening but not breaking. She still didn't respond. One sunny afternoon, as Eleanor taught her writing workshop, a student named Mia shared a poem about her estranged father. The words were raw, filled with longing and pain. After class, Eleanor pulled Mia aside, offering gentle feedback and a listening ear. Mia's eyes filled with tears as she spoke about her father's absence, and Eleanor felt a kinship. She didn't share her own story, but she understood. That evening, she sat with Max on her porch, watching the sunset. The encounter with Mia had stirred something in her, a reminder that pain wasn't unique to her, that others carried similar burdens. She wondered if her children felt their own version of that pain, but she pushed the thought away. She couldn't fix their choices, only her own. The next day, Eleanor received a call from Hargrove. "I got a call from a lawyer in Manhattan," he said, his tone cautious. "They're representing Margaret. She's asking about your estate." Eleanor's heart sank, but she wasn't surprised. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing specific," Hargrove said. "Just that your affairs are in order." "But, Eleanor, this might mean they know about the changes." She thanked him and hung up, her mind racing. Had Margaret's apologies been genuine? Or was this about money? The thought stung, but it also clarified things. Her decision to redirect her estate wasn't about punishment. It was about honoring the life she'd built without them. She spent the rest of the day at the community center, helping plan a summer reading program. The kids' excitement was infectious, and Eleanor found herself smiling as they brainstormed themes. This was her legacy, tangible, meaningful, alive. That night, she wrote in her journal, not about her children, but about Mia's poem, the roses in her garden, the way Max's tail thumped when she came home. These were the moments that defined her now, the ones she wanted to carry forward. Summer arrived, and Eleanor's 76th birthday approached. She didn't dread it this time. Instead, she planned a small gathering at the community center, inviting her students, volunteers, and friends. There would be no cupcake, no lone candle, just laughter, music, and shared stories. Max would be there, too, no doubt stealing bites of cake. The day before her birthday, Eleanor received a package. It was from all three of her children, a photo album filled with pictures from their childhood, along with a letter signed by Margaret, Thomas, and Clara. The letter was heartfelt, acknowledging their absence, their mistakes, and their desire to rebuild. "We love you, Mom," We're sorry. Let's start over. Eleanor sat with the album for hours, her fingers tracing the faces of her younger self and her children. The memories were bittersweet, but they didn't pull her under. She closed the album and set it on her shelf, not in the box with the others. It was a step, small but significant. She didn't call them back, but she didn't rule out the possibility either. For now, she was content with her life, the community center, the shelter, Max, her garden. Her estate would go to those who had been there, who had filled her days with purpose. But her heart, she realized, still had room for her children, if they proved they deserved it. On her birthday, the community center was alive with celebration. Lila brought a homemade cake. The kids sang off-key, and Max chased balloons across the room. Eleanor stood in the middle of it all, her heart full. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was living. As the party wound down, she stepped outside, Max at her side. The summer sky stretched wide above, stars beginning to appear. She thought of her children, of the album, of the years of silence. She didn't know what the future held for them, but she knew her own path. She had chosen herself, her community, her legacy, and that was enough.